Um, Apologies in advance, I've still got a cough and I may explode, but it passes. So, before we start, I just share this with you. I have a dear friend who I'm sure you all know, Rabbi Leda, and Leda loves the Igris. He loves the Rebbe's letters, and he's accustomed to darting around with a letter to show me, and really savors it like somebody savors wine. And he showed me a letter this week, and I thought, because of the Ashkocha protest of it, we'd talk about it in the Shir because it fits together with the Maimah that we're going to be learning from for Lech Lecha, for this week's Parsha, which I'll come to in a moment. But if I summarize the letter says this. It's a letter written by a shoichet to the Rebbe in the early years, in the 60s. And the dilemma of the shoichet is this, that his father has just died, and he has... Did Leda show you this letter? I don't know if you were in shul, but when he was carrying it around. But anyway, so this shoichet's father had just died, and he was employed in a place where there was no minyan to daven in the morning, and although he had two brothers who were obviously saying Kaddish for the father, his dilemma was whether he should stay in that job and maintain his livelihood, or resign from the job and go to a city where he could spend the next 11 months saying Kaddish for his father. And he wrote into the Rebbe and asked him what he should do. And so you might want to ponder that. I'm going to ask, I'll tell you the answer after the Shir, because I'm hoping the Shir is going to give you some insight into it. But I want to start by saying this. This is Pashas Lech Lecha, which is the third Sedra in the Torah. And the first Sedra is Bereshis, where Hashem creates Gashmias, physicality. And there's the whole philosophical, knotty problem of what that really means, because we have a contradiction. And this is common in Chassidus. I've mentioned it many times in the Shurim. But simply put, it goes like this. We have three pieces of Torah that we live by. One is that there are no contradictions in Torah. Two is that that leaves you with a problem when you get an apparent contradiction. So in this particular situation, we have this apparent contradiction, that we have a piece of Torah that says that Hashem is Hashem, ein oid milvadoi, which means there is nothing besides God. So what does it mean there's nothing besides God? You go to the next pasuk, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Did he create something or didn't he create something? If he created something, then what about ein oid milvadoi, that there's nothing else but God? If he didn't create something separate from himself, then what's the whole story of the creation about? Is the Torah telling a lie? Is it exaggerating? So that gets resolved by a lot of learning, a lot of Chassidus, a lot of Kabbalah. But in essence, that's what Bereshis, the first Sedra, is really about. And we haven't got time to do that because we're doing Lech Lecha. Next Sedra is Pashas Noach, in which, as I said last week, and There isn't a recording of it, but so I'll summarize one aspect of it. The issue of man's achievement is first mapped out. In other words, when a man lives his 60, 70, 80, 120 years, what does he achieve and what is the pathway, to his achievement? And we learned that the first basic tenet of this is Yurid Tsarikalia, that in order for there to be an ascent, there has to be first a descent. Why did God make the world that way? We don't understand that, but the pattern is dark followed by light, not light followed by dark. I'm sorry, light is followed by dark, not dark followed by light. So when we go back to Bereshis, Vayihir, Vayihi Boike Yoim Echad, it was evening, it was morning one day. That is the Seder. The order is dark to light. And Parshas Noach is about the fact that the waters of Noach are called Mei Noach, which means the waters of comfort. The word Noach means comfort. And although the Alter Rebbe explains that that's the moshel for earning a living, which is a turbulent, difficult business, notwithstanding that, if you run to the words of, because Teva also means a word, Teva means an ark, but it also means a word. You run to the words of Tora and carry out the mitzvahs, and that is your pathway to success. So that's laid out in the second. This is unnecessary to say, but I'll say it for completeness because of the tape. Obviously, there are millions of inyonim in each of these sedras, because just as Hashem controls the world in every mind-boggling aspect, from 400 billion galaxies to the microbes under your fingernail that you were talking about before, and there are all these billions of variables and which are all controlled by Hashem and are just beyond our ability to even begin to think how to control them. So too it is that in every Sedra there are billions of inyonim which we could take one Sedra and learn it for the rest of our lives, and start at the age of 3 and learn every day and every night, and just learn one Sedra and you never repeat yourself. I mean, that's how complex Torah is. However, having said that, one of the main big subjects of Parshas Noach is that that Hashem has chosen to orchestrate the world in a way that success comes out of difficulty, and I told you some magic, or I told the Shia of some magic last week, that in Hebrew, the shorish, the root of each Hebrew word is 3 letters, and it's one of the basic tenets of mysticism in Torah that those letters can be rearranged, and every time they are rearranged, what comes out is related. It has something to do with it. And in Parshas Noach, I'm just going to say this quickly because it's relevant to what we're going to be learning. Rashi, the Torah says that Hashem told him when he was building the Teva to put in a sohar in the roof, and there are 2 meanings ascribed to that by Rashi. One is that it was a window, and one was that it was an illuminating stone. And when you and the word sohar is tzadik ches resh, and when you rearrange those letters, one rearrangement is rotzen, which means Hashem, rotza, which means Hashem's will, and the other arrangement is tsura, which is pain. So we have this internal dynamic that out of the when we experience pain, one needs to get to a level of sophistication, spiritual sophistication, to understand that that is, for whatever reason, part of God's Ratzon, part of God's will, and because of it, the result is a light source. That you yourself become a light source as a result of that experience. And that's the learning of Parshas Noach, and it's long and it's complicated. But now we go to Parshas Lech Lecha, and in Parshas Lech Lecha, the Torah begins to talk about what is the general function of man in the general background of Gashmias, for physicality. And the tragic thing about this is that it's all one's purpose and one's flowering and one's capacity to have a life instead of an existence is all mapped out in this Torah, or particularly in the Chassidus of this Torah. And the tragedy is how few people learn it. And, people are busy with their iPhones and their gadgets and everything else. And one of the things that begins to emerge in this week's Sidra, and this is one of the most important, I don't know how to emphasize this enough, is that there are multiple layers of personal perspective. You can have the perspective that you're driving down the road, some idiot drives out and bumps you, it's bad luck. And you can go a bit deeper and understand that it was Hashgacha Pratis and it's Gamza L'Tova, that is also for the good. So maybe it was that if you hadn't got bumped and hadn't got stayed, you'd have had some tragedy happen to you or something, and you can go deeper with that perspective. Ultimately, there's depth and depth and depth to the perspective until it is possible to reach a relationship with your God where all the hiddenness of Hashem almost disappears, certainly for tzaddikim. So, and this concept of these layers of perspective is introduced in this week's Sedra. Let me give you an example before we start. The Sedra begins by Hashem saying to Avram that he should get up and leave his birthplace, leave his home, and go to a place that I'll show you. Now, let's understand this. Hashem is telling Avram Avinu to leave his comfort zone and go somewhere. The first thing to notice is Avram doesn't ask him where, doesn't ask Hashem where. And he doesn't have any real issue with doing what he's told by Hashem. Now, you might think that if Hashem appeared to you and me, we wouldn't have any issue of doing it either. But if you think about that for a moment, Avram is told to go to, ultimately he's told to go to Eretz Canaan, and he goes there, and it's a long, difficult journey, basically by foot, and he gets to Canaan, and what happens? There's a famine there. Now, nowhere in any of the Torah literature do we have a record of Avram Avinu saying to God, I don't get it. You told me to leave home, you told me to leave my comfort zone, you told me to come here, I've come here, it's taken me all this time and all this trouble and what do you reward me with? You reward me with a famine, so that I've got to go to Mitzrayim, I've got to go to Egypt, which is what he does. Give you another example. Hashem tells him to be fruitful and multiply. So he and Sarah have children. He has Ishmael. Ishmael's a Rosha. He doesn't say to Hashem, you told me to have children, you didn't tell me I was going to have a Rosha. Then he's the hero of monotheism, and he is told as a prize for that he's going to be as populous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the beach. And he gives birth to Yitzhak, who's a tzaddik gomer, who's an absolute prince amongst men. And what happens? Hashem tells him he thinks Hashem tells him to shech him, and he has the whole problem with the Akedah. We still say it every morning. And at no point does he say, where is God? Where is this God that told me to do this and told me to do that? So the question is, why didn't he? I mean, common sense would, and many people fold like that. Many people will tell you, for example, that when they take on a horror, a vision of something which is horrific or painful, they blame God. And they say, where was God? Where was God in the Holocaust? Where was God with the victims of these terrorists last week? And the answer is that we don't understand. That's the first point. We don't understand. But we equally have to learn that what comes from the mere fact that something has happened is that it's supposed to have happened, and it is for one's benefit, and that there is a growth path being revealed. That Zohar, the light, is becoming available as a result of that pathway being opened up. Now, it's very difficult to get to that perspective, and I'll tell you now, the process requires constant visits to the spiritual gym. If you want to have a beautiful, muscly body, like some of the ones around this table, then you know very well that you've got to diet and exercise and walk and whatever it is. You want to get a perspective, a spiritual perspective, which gives some real meaning and tweaking to your life and some real purpose to your life. You've got to go to the spiritual gym. The spiritual gym is learning Torah and performing mitzvahs. That's how it's done. And the more Torah that a person learns, the more these vague shadows at another perspective begin to crystallize and begin to become more focused. So l'chaim. So let's start with this. We have a Gemara. And the Gemara, we have a piece of Talmud which says that man was born to toil. Okay, that's what it says. It says that there's another piece of this Talmud which says that there are various forms of this toil. One is speech, one is action, and one is a different, level of speech, which we'll come to in a second. But man is born to toil. In other words, and how do we know that? We know that from this week's Sedra, where when of